London, 1666. Let me tell you, the place was buzzing like a beehive that had been kicked a few too many times. Imagine narrow little streets packed with shops, homes, stalls, and more people than you could shake a stick at. Every corner had someone shouting about fish, bread, cloth, or God knows what else. And the smell, oh friend, the smell could knock the socks off a horse. You had roasting meat, horse manure, wood smoke, sewage, ale, and perfume, all mixing together. Welcome to London. Now, before you get too romantic about it, let me be clear. London wasn't some clean, polished city. No, it was a mess. Half wood, half smoke, half gossip. Houses leaned in so close across the lanes that you could practically shake hands with your neighbor from your upstairs window. Privacy? Never heard of her. If you argued with your wife, the whole street knew by supper. As for me, well, I was just your everyday Londoner, nothing grand. I worked as an apprentice to a merchant. We dealt in cloth mostly, wool, silks if the coin was right, sometimes cheap linen for the folks who couldn't afford the fancy stuff. My master liked to say trade was the blood that kept London's heart beating. Personally, I thought ale played a bigger role, but sure, cloth works too. Life wasn't bad, though. Busy, noisy, sure, but there was always something happening. The markets were alive with shouting sellers. You'd hear fresh mackerel straight from the river, though God help the poor soul who actually ate fish straight from the Thames. That river was more soup than water. Still, people bought, people ate, and people carried on. And oh, the reliance we had on fire. Fire was life. You needed it to cook, to heat water, to stay warm when the winds cut through your bones in winter. Every home had a fire burning day and night. We were so used to it that we barely thought about how dangerous it was. Sparks flying from chimneys, just part of the scenery. Smoke filling your lungs. That's called character building. Of course, looking back now, the city was basically a giant bonfire waiting for someone to drop a match. Everything was wood, houses, shops, taverns. Even the roofs were timber or thatched in places. And the streets were so narrow that if you stuck your arms out, you could almost touch both walls. A single flame could leap across in seconds. But back then, nobody worried too much. Fires happened all the time. Someone's kitchen caught, a neighbor's chimney cracked. Folk just grabbed buckets and dealt with it. We had bigger worries anyway. You've heard of the Great Plague, right? 1665 was a nightmare. Rats everywhere, people dying left and right, and red crosses painted on doors to mark plague houses. Some families never came back from that. By 66, the worst had passed, thank the Lord, but the memory lingered. Folks were still whispering about disease, death, and God's anger. The fire hadn't come yet, but the city already felt heavy with worry. Still, life had to go on. You'd see apprentices like me carrying bolts of cloth on our backs, bakers rolling out bread at sunrise, taverns filling with laughter by evening. Kids played in the alleys, dodging horse dung like it was a sport. And Londoners loved their gossip. Rumors about politics, war, or scandal spread faster than fleas. If you wanted news, you didn't need a paper. You just needed a neighbor with a big mouth. And speaking of mouths, food was, let's say, interesting. Bread was the staple, of course. Sometimes you'd get meat pies, though what kind of meat you didn't always want to ask. Fish, if you trusted it. Ale, always ale. Water wasn't exactly safe, so we drank beer for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Kids, too. If you weren't tipsy, were you even living in London? Now, about the summer of 1666, it was scorching. I mean, sweat through your shirt, can't sleep at night hot. Rain barely came, and when it did, it was like a tease gone before the dust even settled. Wooden houses baked in the sun, dry as kindling. We joked about frying eggs on the cobblestones. I didn't know it then, but all that heat was loading the dice for disaster. Let me paint you a little picture. Imagine standing in Cheapside on a summer's day, stalls everywhere, hawkers yelling, carts creaking by, horses clopping along, the smell of roasting chestnuts fighting with the stink of the tanneries. Somewhere a fiddler's playing a merry tune while two drunks brawl over spilled ale. Kids are chasing each other around, merchants haggling till they're red in the face. That was London, messy, noisy, alive. But beneath all that life, there was this tension. You could feel it. Maybe it was the plague's shadow. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe just the way the city groaned under its own weight. People muttered about bad omens, about God testing us, and yet every morning we got up, opened our shops, lit our fires, and carried on. Because that's what Londoners do. I didn't know it then, but those crowded streets, those rickety houses, those fires burning in every hearth, they were all just tinder waiting for the right spark, and the spark was coming soon, very soon. Looking back, I sometimes wonder, did we feel it in our bones? Did we know something was about to change everything? I don't think so. We were too busy living, too busy working, too busy sweating through that endless hot summer. The fire was waiting, quiet and patient, and we were walking straight into it. But for now, in that moment, London was alive, loud, dirty, smelly, full of hope and fear and everything in between. A city of wood, fire, and people just trying to make it through the day. And me, I was just another soul in the crowd, a young apprentice with sore feet, ink-stained fingers, and more dreams than coin. I thought I knew what life was about. I thought I understood the city, but I had no idea. Because soon all of it, my street, my home, the very heart of London, would be tested in flames. September the 2nd, 1666. I remember that night so clearly it's burned into my head, pun very much intended. But the truth is, when the day started, it was just another hot, restless night in London. The air was thick, the kind that sticks to your skin. You could practically hear the city groaning in the heat. I went to bed grumbling about the weather, same as everyone else. I had no idea what was coming. Now here's the funny thing. Fires weren't unusual back then, not at all. We used fire for everything, cooking, heating, lighting pipes. A little spark here or there was nothing new. If you woke up in the night and smelled smoke, half the time it was just someone's chimney misbehaving. Londoners were used to it, maybe too used to it. That night, though, that night was different. It all began down on Pudding Lane in the bakery of Thomas Farriner. Some say a spark from his oven caught the wood nearby. Some blamed carelessness. Some even whispered about foreigners plotting. Me, I think it was just bad luck meeting bad timing. Whatever the cause, once those flames took hold, London didn't stand a chance. I didn't see the bakery, of course. I was sleeping in my narrow little room above my master's shop when I first heard the noise. At first, it was just shouting in the street. Nothing strange about that. Londoners shouted at all hours. But then came the bells, church bells, clanging fast and loud. That wasn't for a wedding or a feast. That was fire. I stumbled to the window, still half asleep, and I saw it. A glow, red and angry, rising over the rooftops. Smoke billowed up, whipped by the wind. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a little chimney blaze. This was something fierce. I shook my master awake, yelling about fire. He groaned, muttering that it had burned itself out, like always. But within minutes, even he was up, pale as parchment. The fire was spreading. Fast. We rushed downstairs, grabbing whatever we could carry. Let me tell you, when you think your whole world's about to burn, suddenly every object feels both precious and useless at the same time. I stuffed a few coins and a small wooden cross into my pocket. My master tried hauling a chest of cloth bolts, but nearly threw his back out. In the end, we just grabbed what our arms could hold. By the time we hit the street, it was chaos. Neighbors were already running, some clutching children, others hauling furniture onto carts. People shouted, argued, stumbled over each other, and still others stood there, squinting into the night, muttering, "It won't spread this far. It never does." Oh, how wrong they were. The wind was the devil's own breath that night, strong, hot, and cruel. It picked up sparks and carried them across the roofs, turning little blazes into monsters. Houses caught like they'd been waiting for this moment all summer. One after another, wood went up with a crackle and roar. You could hear beams splitting, tiles crashing, glass shattering. I remember seeing a woman dragging a mattress down the street, shouting at her husband to hurry. He was trying to balance a cage of chickens on his head, feathers flying everywhere. Even in the panic, I almost laughed. Almost. Some folks ran toward the fire. Would you believe it? They wanted to help, bucket lines and all. Brave, maybe, but hopeless. The flames were too strong, leaping faster than any man could throw water. I joined a line for all of 10 seconds before the heat drove me back. It was like standing next to the sun. My eyebrows nearly singed clean off. As we backed away, the bells kept ringing, louder, faster, desperate. It felt like the whole city was screaming through them. By now, smoke filled the air so thick it clawed at your lungs. My eyes stung, my throat burned. I clutched my bundle of belongings tighter, though I already knew most of it wouldn't survive. Around me, people cried out names, searching for loved ones. Kids wailed, dogs barked, horses reared in terror. It was madness. And yet some people, some just stood there. I remember one old man sitting on his doorstep, staring at the fire creeping closer. He didn't move, didn't blink. Maybe he'd seen too much already. Maybe he was ready to let it take him. I'll never forget his face, lit orange by the flames. My master finally shouted, "To the river!" That was the plan most people had. The Thames was the only open space wide enough to feel safe. And besides, if you could get a boat, maybe you could float yourself and your belongings away. So off we ran, shoving through the crowd, hearts pounding. Behind us, the fire roared louder, like it was chasing us. Sparks rained down, stinging when they touched skin. A thatched roof nearby went up like a torch, the heat slapping us in the face. People screamed, pushing harder. I looked back just once, and I swear it felt like the whole city was aflame. Orange light stretched across the sky, brighter than day. A wave of fire rolled through the houses, unstoppable. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching the end of the world. We ran on, not knowing if we'd make it, not knowing if there was anywhere left to run. All I knew was this: London was burning, and the night had only just begun. If you've never heard a whole city burn, let me tell you, it sounds alive. The fire didn't just crackle or pop like a campfire. No, this was a beast. It roared, it howled, it screamed as it tore through London. Imagine standing inside the throat of a dragon, every breath it takes blasting heat and smoke. That was the sound of London on fire. By the time we reached the main streets, the blaze had spread so wide that "where's the fire?" stopped being a question. The fire was everywhere, roofs collapsing, sparks shooting like arrows, whole buildings glowing red before crashing into piles of embers. You couldn't look anywhere without seeing flames licking higher than church spires. People were running in every direction, and honestly, most of us didn't know where we were running. Away from the fire? Yes. But the fire was behind us, beside us, ahead of us. It felt like the flames were chasing us through our own streets. Some folks clung to their belongings with both arms. You'd see women staggering under piles of clothes, men dragging trunks so heavy they slowed to a crawl. One fellow had tied his feather bed to his back like a turtle shell. Another was pushing a wheelbarrow full of ale jugs. Priorities, I suppose. Others gave up on possessions altogether. I saw one mother carrying nothing but her baby, her eyes wide with terror, face streaked with soot. A baker I knew ran past in nothing but his shirt, barefoot, as if the devil himself was nipping his heels. And through all that madness, you had the opportunists, cart owners charging absurd prices to carry people's goods, 10 shillings for a ride if you had it. If not, too bad. Some grew rich that night, preying on desperation. I hated them for it, but at the same time, I almost understood. Chaos turns people strange. As for me, I still clutched the little bundle I'd managed to grab, though the longer I ran, the heavier it felt. Coins, cloth, trinkets, they suddenly seemed ridiculous compared to survival. At one point, I nearly tossed it all aside. But fear makes you stubborn. We tried to head toward the Thames, thinking the river might be a wall the fire couldn't cross. The streets leading there, though, were jammed with people. Carts overturned, animals panicked, shouts and cries mixing into one deafening roar. Smoke burned our throats, made us cough till our ribs ached. Every breath felt like swallowing ash. At one point, I stumbled and I thought, this is it, I'll be trampled. Feet all around me, the press of bodies, the ground shaking with movement. Somehow, someone yanked me back up. A stranger. I never saw their face, but their grip saved me. That small kindness in the middle of hell kept me going. Authorities? Ha! If you're imagining calm leaders taking charge, forget it. The Lord Mayor himself apparently looked at the flames early on and muttered something like, "A woman could piss it out." That gives you an idea of how seriously he took it at first. By the time they realized how bad it was far too late. Some tried to pull down houses to stop the fire's spread, but hesitation and confusion ruined the effort. Should we demolish homes? Whose homes? Who pays for the damage? Meanwhile, the fire laughed and leapt past them. All those delays cost London dearly. The closer we got to the river, the hotter it grew. Heat pressed against us like a solid wall, forcing us back, but still we pushed. We reached the waterfront finally, and the sight was unforgettable. The Thames, usually a slow, stinking snake of a river, now churned with boats of every size. People piled into barges, ferries, anything that floated. Families sobbed as they loaded their goods. Rowers shouted for space. Some jumped into the water outright, desperate to escape the choking smoke. And above it all, the fire lit the sky like dawn come early. The city behind us was a sea of flames. Whole rows of houses collapsed with a thunderous crash, sparks shooting upward in showers. St. Paul's Cathedral loomed in the distance, its great dome glowing ominously. Nobody believed it could fall. It was stone, after all. But stone or no stone, even the mighty St. Paul's would not survive. I remember turning to look at my master. His face was streaked black, his eyes wet, not from tears, but from the smoke. He just shook his head, whispering, "It's all gone. All of it." And I felt the same. Our street, our shop, our neighbors, it was gone. Even if the fire missed a corner, it wouldn't be the same city afterward. London as we knew it was dying in front of us. But here's the thing about people. Even in the middle of disaster, some managed to help. I saw strangers pulling children out of crowds, offering water, guiding the lost. Amidst greed and panic, there were sparks of kindness. That gave me hope, even as the flames roared louder. Still, the fear was overwhelming. Every sound made you jump: the crack of a beam, the scream of a horse, the crash of a collapsing tavern. The fire seemed endless, unstoppable. People prayed aloud, voices trembling, asking God to spare them. I prayed too, though I barely knew what words I spoke. As the night dragged into day, the fire didn't weaken. It grew. The sun rose, but you couldn't tell because the sky was already orange with flame and black with smoke. Ash rained down like snow, coating hair and clothes. My arms ached from carrying my bundle. My lungs ached from breathing soot. My legs ached from running. But still, we moved, because stopping meant being swallowed whole. By then, it wasn't just about saving goods or even homes. It was about saving ourselves, our very lives. London was a furnace, and we were the sparks flying before it. That's when I realized this wasn't just a fire. This was an inferno, and it wasn't done with us yet. By the second day, it felt like London wasn't a city anymore. It was a battlefield. Fire on one side, people fleeing on the other, everyone caught in between. The Thames had helped some, sure, but the flames weren't stopping at the water's edge. They leapt from wharves and warehouses, devouring anything that could burn. So people did the only thing left to do. We ran. The roads out of London were jammed with thousands of us. It was like every soul in the city had spilled into the countryside, carrying whatever scraps of their lives they could grab. The sight was something I'll never forget. Endless lines of carts, wheelbarrows, and people with bundles strapped to their backs, all trudging away from the glowing furnace. That used to be home. We looked like an army in retreat. Some still wore their nightshirts, faces smeared with soot, eyes wide from shock. Kids clung to their mothers, dogs barked and whined, chickens flapped in cages, cows mooed in protest as they were dragged along. It was chaos dressed as a parade. My master and I stuck close, though neither of us knew where we were going. Just away. He kept muttering about the shop, the cloth, the loss. I think he half believed if we turned back, it would all still be there. But every time we looked over our shoulders, the truth glared back. Towers of smoke, red skies, and the roar of the Inferno. Eventually, the roads grew too crowded to move fast. People began setting up makeshift camps in fields and meadows outside the city. We joined them. The sight was pitiful. Families huddled under wagons, cloths stretched as tents, whole crowds sitting in the grass, looking stunned. It was like London had emptied its heart into the countryside. Food was a problem almost immediately. Bread vanished in a blink, and prices soared. Water wasn't easy to find either. We shared what we had, but hunger gnawed quickly. I remember trading a small scrap of cloth for half a loaf, probably the worst deal of my merchant life, but what else could I do? Still, even in that misery, kindness showed itself. A woman with nothing but a pot of stew offered us each a ladleful. A farmer opened his barn for strangers to sleep in. People gave each other space, shared blankets, whispered words of comfort. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Of course, not everyone was so kind. Rumors ran through the camps like wildfire of their own. People whispered that foreigners had started the blaze. Frenchmen, Dutchmen, Catholics, anyone different became the target. Suspicion turned into shouting, and shouting sometimes turned into fists. I saw a man beaten near to death just because someone heard him speaking French. Fear makes people cruel. We were all searching for answers, but the truth was simple. The fire didn't need a foreign hand to start it. London had been begging for it with every wooden beam, every narrow lane, every chimney coughing sparks. Still, try telling that to a mob looking for someone to blame. Nights in the camps were strange. You'd lie on the cold ground, staring at the sky, and in the distance you could still see the glow of the fire. It never stopped. Day after day, night after night, the city burned. Sometimes the wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke and ash, a bitter reminder that the nightmare wasn't done. I remember one boy, couldn't have been more than 10, sitting by our fire. His family was gone, burned or scattered, he didn't know. He sat silent, clutching a charred doll he'd pulled from the ruins. That silence haunted me more than all the shouting. Yet even in the middle of despair, life carried on. Babies cried, people argued. Someone played a fiddle one night, trying to lift spirits. We laughed weakly, though it felt wrong with the city still burning. But laughter is stubborn. It sneaks in even when you least expect it. For me, the hardest part wasn't the hunger or the fear. It was the uncertainty. Nobody knew if we'd have a home to return to or if there would even be a London left when the fire stopped. Some said the city was finished forever. Others swore the king would rebuild it grander than before. Me? I didn't know what to believe. All I knew was that the place I called home was being erased street by street. On the third day, word spread that St. Paul's Cathedral had fallen. People gasped, some wept outright. St. Paul's wasn't just a church. It was the symbol of London. Stone walls, towering spire, a place we thought indestructible. Hearing it had crumbled under the flames broke something inside us. If even stone couldn't stand, what hope did we have? But humans are stubborn creatures. As the days wore on, even with the fire still raging, talk shifted from fear to plans. We'll rebuild, people said. We'll come back. They spoke through cracked lips with empty bellies, but they said it anyway. Hope is hard to kill. I'll admit I wasn't sure. I lay awake at night, listening to the crackle of campfires, staring at the glow on the horizon, and wondered if London was finished. Maybe the city had pushed its luck too far. Maybe this was God's punishment, final and complete. But in the mornings when I saw mothers braiding their daughters' hair, or neighbors sharing bread, or kids chasing each other through the grass as if nothing had happened, I thought, maybe not. Maybe London would rise again. We had lost so much. Homes, shops, treasures, neighbors. But not everything was gone. We still had each other, and that meant something. The fire could take wood and stone, but it couldn't burn away the stubborn will of Londoners to keep going. Still, as I sat there in that camp, with ash clinging to my clothes and smoke on the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder, when we finally went back, what would we find? Would there be streets to walk, shops to trade, churches to pray in? Or would we return to nothing but blackened ruins? I didn't know. None of us did. All we could do was wait for the fire to burn itself out and pray that London's story wasn't ending, only changing. When the fire finally died, London didn't feel like London anymore. The air was still heavy with smoke, and the smell, charred wood, wet ash, and something darker I don't like to name, lingered for weeks. We had all been waiting for the flames to stop, praying for silence. But when the silence finally came, it wasn't relief I felt. It was emptiness. The first time I walked back into the city, I almost didn't recognize it. The streets I had known since childhood, the narrow alleys, the wooden houses leaning against each other, the bustling markets, all of it was gone. Blackened rubble stretched as far as I could see. The sky itself seemed gray with sorrow. I wandered through what used to be my street, my master's shop, the place I'd spent half my life hauling bolts of cloth and scribbling accounts, was nothing but ashes and a half-fallen beam. I crouched there for a long time, running soot through my fingers, trying to believe it was real. A lifetime of work gone in 4 days. St. Paul's was the hardest to look at. The great cathedral had always felt eternal, stone, mighty, unshakable. But the fire had gutted it. Its walls stood cracked, its roof collapsed into heaps of smoldering ruin. People gathered around in silence, staring as if they'd lost a member of their own family. In a way, we had. St. Paul's wasn't just a church. It was London's heart. But it wasn't only buildings that were lost. So many stories had ended in those flames. Neighbors who never made it out, families torn apart, livelihoods erased. Every street held memories, and every memory was burned. You could see it in people's faces as they walked through the ruins. Grief, shock, disbelief. Some wept openly, others moved like ghosts, too hollow for tears. And yet, even among the ruins, life stirred. People set up little stalls in the open spaces, selling bread or beer, because even disaster doesn't stop hunger. Carpenters and masons walked the streets, already talking about rebuilding. Children played in the ashes, their laughter strange against the silence, but also comforting. The king himself, Charles II, came out to see the devastation. He promised the city would rise again, grander than before. Plans began for wider streets, stronger stone houses, buildings less likely to burn. Surveyors unrolled their maps right there on the rubble, sketching out a new London. For the first time in days, people's eyes held more than just grief. They held possibility. Of course, not everyone welcomed the future so easily. Some wanted their homes rebuilt exactly as they were. Others grumbled about taxes and who would pay for all this. Rebuilding a city isn't quick, cheap, or easy, but there was no choice. The fire had forced us into a new beginning, whether we liked it or not. As for me, I was torn. Part of me wanted to pack up, leave London forever, and find some quiet little village where the only fire I'd ever see was a cooking hearth. But another part of me knew I couldn't. London was chaos, yes, but it was my chaos. It was where I belonged. So I stayed. My master and I talked about starting again, though he sighed often, saying, "It'll take a lifetime to rebuild what we lost." I told him maybe that was the point. Maybe this was the start of something different, something stronger. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't walk away either. In the weeks that followed, I saw Londoners do what they do best, endure. Tents and shacks went up to house the homeless. Taverns popped back into business, even if all they had was a single keg of ale and a roof of canvas. Merchants traded out of wagons. We stumbled, we argued, we grieved, but we kept moving. And through it all, hope flickered like an ember refusing to go out. Sometimes I'd sit on a pile of rubble at night, staring at the stars through the smoke, and think about everything the fire had taken. My street, my neighbors, my childhood. But then I'd hear a baby crying, or laughter from a group of workers, or the clang of a hammer on stone, and I'd realize something. The fire hadn't won. It had destroyed buildings, yes, but it hadn't destroyed us. London was scarred, but it was alive. Years from now, maybe people will look at the new streets, the grander houses, the stronger walls, and forget the pain that came before. Maybe they'll just see a beautiful city, not the ashes it rose from. But I'll remember the smell of smoke, the roar of the flames, the sight of thousands fleeing together. I'll remember the kindness of strangers in the camps, the anger of mobs looking for blame, the way the city seemed to die and yet refused to stay dead. And I'll remember what it felt like to stand there in the ruins of my home and realize that even though the fire had taken nearly everything, it hadn't taken the one thing that mattered most, the will to keep going. Because that's what London is, not just wood and stone, not just churches and markets. London is its people, and people don't burn so easily. I lived through the Great Fire of London. I watched it rise, I watched it rage, and I watched it fall. It changed everything I knew, but it didn't end us. The flames burned the city, but they couldn't burn away hope. And hope, as it turns out, is the strongest foundation of all.